Hi guys, John Sprague here with Onward Property Partners in St. Louis, Missouri, and excited today to share a few tools that we've been able to use along the way that's helped our growth, and hopefully it'll help yours as well. And so, one of the things that's been shared with me before is trust people when they tell you who they are. And that's kind of an interesting concept to look at. One of the things that we look at there is the behavior, right? And so if we want to look at what people are telling us who they are, not necessarily through an interview process, but really more of their actions. The best way to look at it is the best predictor of the future is going to be the past, right? So we want to look at the behavioral style of that individual, and we want to make sure in a recruiting situation, as we're finding a place for them on the team or within our organization, we want to identify where their strength zones are, and we want to make sure that the areas of accountability are consistent with the strength zone of that candidate. So that's one major application that we use it. And then another one too is really in our consultation conversations. And what I've noticed here is that when you have a really good idea of the person's behavioral styles, you can get a pretty good idea of where their areas of sensitivity might be, their rate of speed, different things like that. And what it allows us to do there is it allows us to truly have empathy and look at the situation from their perspective. And help walk them through that process in a little bit more of a relatable fashion. So, one of the tools, there's a lot of different behavioral assessments that you can utilize out there. One that we utilize, not necessarily the best out there. I'm sure that's kind of somewhat subjective, but it's widely accessible and it's free, and it does a pretty good job. So it's actually the DISC assessment. And so the first thing is, let's look at all the different behavioral styles. And so the DISC assessment, the D actually stands for driver. The I is the influencer. S is for stability, or the stabilizer. And then C is compliant. So here's a few things to kind of look at. So how do I identify if somebody is in one of these categories? And if you take one of the assessments, what you'll see is that you'll be asked a series of questions, and then once you're completed, it'll actually send you a pretty significant report. And in that report, it'll share with you that you might lead in one of these. Not might. You're absolutely going to lead in one of these categories or one of these different behavioral styles. So on the driver side, what happens there is we've got about, depending on what study you look at, somewhere between 5 and 7% of the population are the drivers. And so we'll hear John Davis talk about the love of the D, and it's, I'm here because everything that we're doing today is because of me, right? I'm the successful one. I'm the one that's building the empire. And so you'll see that with the driver mentality. Now the influencer, this is probably in that scenario, probably more the cheerleader. A little bit more rah-rah, a little bit more motivational kind of based. You're going to see a lot of excitement there. And the other thing with the influencer is that relationships are the key. Relationships are key with the influencer. So now in stabilizer, relationships are still pretty key. They're definitely a high priority for those stabilizers. The stabilizers, you might recognize these folks in your group as they're kind of the glue. They're kind of the glue of saying, hey, I don't be offended by the D. He didn't mean it that way. This is what he meant. Let's go ahead and keep moving forward. And so these are the folks that kind of keep that organization intact and to keep moving forward. And they're a critical asset for the organization. And then you've got C here is more compliant. So this starts coming up when you start seeing people be more in tune with more of a perfectionist type of an approach. They want to make sure that everything's done right. And so those are some of the characteristics of each one of our behavioral styles that we have out there, and just knowing that alone helps out in identifying a little bit more about where the people's strength zones are, and that helps out a ton on the recruiting side. Now on the consultation sides, we also want to find out, what are they sensitive to? What are their greatest fears, right? What are they scared of? So the driver, their number one fear taken advantage of. They don't want to be taken advantage of. They don't want to go ahead and invest in something or someone and then have that person betray them. That's their greatest fear, okay? Whether it's time, money, energy, anything like that, right? Now, the other thing here with the driver is that you're gonna when speaking with them, they're gonna want to be quick, to the point, bottom line. What's the bottom line? What's the impact there? WIFM, what's in it for me? How does that make a difference for me? And so the quicker you can get there with the driver, the better off you're going to be in their category. So then with the influencer, their number one fear, if relationships are the number one thing that they look at, what do you think their number one fear might be? What's that? Rejection. Their greatest fear is rejection, right? And so that's something where if we're putting somebody in a position that's going to have a high rejection type of an opportunity, this person's probably going to get burnt out from that if they're an extreme I, a high I, right? But the big thing here is that they're looking for the relationships. They're trying to identify scenarios or opportunities that are going to impact their personal relationships and their professional relationships in a positive way. You have a lot of networkers in this kind of category. These are the people that are the life of the party. Okay, so these are the folks that are kind of the rah-rah, super excited folks. So then over here you've got the stabilizer. And the stabilizer, we talked about their characteristics of kind of being the glue of that environment. And so what their number one fear, if they're called a stabilizer, what would be the opposite of that?
Something unstable.
Unstable? Yeah. How about change? So, it doesn't mean the stabilizer can't change. It just means it takes them a little bit longer to identify, to validate, is that change really going to be a benefit for me? And they're going to be asking the question of, okay, why are we changing? What is the impact around it? So there's a lot more cerebral activity going on here than the D or I. They're going to have their blink and they're boom, they're in, right? These guys are sold really quick. These two folks, what they're called is hot. Okay, so they move fast. All right. And these guys here, they move slow. There's no right or wrong, right? Being recognized in one of these two categories myself, I noticed that I move fast to make decisions that I've got conviction around, yet that also places trust in areas that might not have had a chance to be vetted, right? And so sometimes I've got kind of trust is almost becomes a challenge because trust folks right at the gate, right? Where these folks, you got to earn the trust. To earn the trust here, right? So, so now with our compliant folks, their number one fear, these are the guys, they want to do it right. If it's not done right, we're not doing it at all. That's kind of the mantra, right? That's the stuff that you hear, perfectionist, right? So the number one fear is being wrong, right? So now you've got an idea of what each one of these folks kind of look like. The first thing that I would do is you're on this journey to go ahead and understand behavioral styles a little bit more. First thing I do is I'd carve out time during the day of 15, 20 minutes where you're spending time learning about not only these behavioral styles, but some of the other assessments that are out there as well. It'll get you more acclimated with it. The second thing that I would highly advise you do, actually I do this in one of your first 15 minutes, is you can actually do your own DISC assessment for free. Tony Robbins has a great one out there. If you just Google Tony Robbins DISC assessment, it's free. It'll be sent to you, and what happens is you'll do the series of questions, and in that survey, once it's done, it automatically generates. You're going to get a 54-page report about you. And it's a massive eye-opener. It really puts things up in the mirror. It's automatically generated, so there is some variance to it, so you got to look at that. And ideally, you've got somebody going through that and validating it with you, which we can talk about in another whiteboard. However, what it'll do is it'll give you a pretty good idea. And when you're looking at that stuff, you're like, oh, yeah, that's why that's kind of going, oh, yeah, that makes sense there, or man, that's just not me at all. And what's interesting too, a lot of times that I've had folks go through this process, their knee-jerk reaction to one of the things that shows up on their assessment is that that's not me, that can't be me. And then they'll come back a week later and they'll say, you know, I thought about this, and what ended up happening is that actually is me. However, what's happened is that I've adjusted my activities so I don't have that behavior leak out, right? So if it's, they've created some sort of system around it to go ahead and make sure that that's not the first thing. What's critical about the behavioral styles in an organization when you're bringing people on to recruit to be a part of the team is that these are the things that are natural, right? So your natural tendencies will continue to show. That's why we started out. When people tell you who they are, believe them, right? And so this is where the natural tendencies are. And so those natural tendencies, if you match those up in the areas of the accountability, you're going to give that person the best opportunity for success and ultimately push your organization to the next level. So Ricky, you had a question about some of the behavioral styles?
Yeah, just, I mean, really, when you're initially talking to someone, what are some key things that you can kind of focus in on that will kind of tell where they fall into the DISC assessment?
What category they're in, or what
category?
Probable?
Yeah.
And so, you know, the first thing is actually just listening, right? And so just listening to just what the conversation's looking like. Mm-hmm. You know, your driver, again, they're going to be fast to the point, give me the numbers, what's in it for me, how's that going to impact the bottom line, okay? So that's, when you start hearing tonalities of that, you're going to see that faster talker, mm-hmm. right? And those are things you can start picking up on. And then the influencer, they're going to be highly relationship oriented, so they're going to have a lot to say.
Yeah.
So this is a person you might actually have to set aside a pretty good chunk of time while you're having those conversations with them and letting them talk, mm-hmm. right? Because when you cut them off, you're losing with them. When you're letting them talk, you're winning with them, right? Whereas the driver, if you take their time, you just lost with them, right? And so then the stabilizer over here, you've got the folks that they're going to be, like in our scenario, they're going to be the folks that you're going to hear more pronounced. The folks that are going to say, you know, I've lived in the home a number of years, and they're struggling with that. They're grappling with that a little bit. And so those are the people that, how you win there is that you bring awareness to it. You know, just say, look, you know, I completely understand that, right? You're validating them, and then you're saying, look, what the situation is, we recognize working with enough folks that are in a similar transition as yours. There's two moves. There's a physical move and there's an emotional move. And just by having an awareness around that, it's transformational itself. And I can tell you, when you do that, you just took the steam out. You just took you just released the pressure there, because then this person's saying, oh, they understand. They get me, right? They get me, okay? So then the C, the compliant guy, you're going to start seeing things where you're going to get a different series of questions, way different than the series of questions are. You're going to hear a lot about feel. How do you feel about this? What do you think? Over here, it's going to be, what's the evidence? Mm-hmm. Okay, so give me the numbers to tell me what's going on behind that, behind that recommendation. Okay. And they're going to dive deep into those numbers, and you better be right, because they're going to know if you're not. Okay. Right? Now, that's kind of the first. And the second thing I'd share is that there's certain scenarios where what you can do is you can kind of look at different job roles and kind of make some early on assumptions. I wouldn't pigeonhole it into this, because it's not it's not empirical data. It's not 100% accurate. However, your high C's, you're going to see a lot of them reside in roles like engineers, architects, anything that's got to be really precise. Okay. So you can go into that kind of assuming if somebody says that they're an engineer, you got a pretty good idea. You better have your statistics ready and your numbers ready to go, right? I guess. This guy's not, he might care about them. They definitely don't care. They don't care a lot. They're going to move forward with emotion, and they're going to justify with reason if they justify it all, mm-hmm. right? Now the stabilizer, you're going to recognize here, a lot of those folks you're going to see in kind of the educational department and development, teachers, nurses, different things like that, right? Because they're naturally caring, they're naturally stabilizing the environment that they're in. And so we kind of talked about this, is that this is already happening in everyday life. We're just bringing awareness to it. And by having that awareness, we have a deeper understanding of how they see things through their perspective, which allows us to have a greater level of empathy, which builds a deeper level of rapport, right?
Makes sense.
And so then our influencers, these are the guys that are probably going to be in some sort of a sales role, something like that. They're going to be the guys and gals that they're the life of the party. They're going to be the folks that have the latest, trends as far as clothes and such. And then our drivers, these are folks that usually are going to gravitate towards some sort of leadership role. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be the CEO of whatever they're doing, but they're likely in a role that is that's allowed.
Growth and encouraged.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if growth isn't there, that they disengage. So these folks are they're addicted to growth. You're going to hear things like empire builder. So you've got your empire builder here, and you've got your empire protector here.
Okay.
Right? So in order to have a sustainable empire, do you just have a bunch of Ds? No, right. However, in a launch phase, these folks are really valuable. In a launch phase, those folks are really bad. They're okay with the chaos, where these folks are not okay with the chaos. This is more systems oriented, different things like that. So depending on where your organization is, you might have some difference in what you're looking for. But in a consultation type of a role, just having awareness of what you're looking at can mean can be the whole difference.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage you today, take a moment, hop on TonyRobbins.com, get the DISC assessment done, review it, and I'll tell you what, if you'd like, send it over to me. I'd be happy to review it and share any insights that I had an opportunity to have over the hundreds of assessments that I've had a chance to review over the years. And you'll catch my information right below, and I hope you have a great day. Take care, guys.